So hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to the 5th day of 2 weeks of Thomas Hardy, and today we're going to be talking about Two on a Tower. Chapter 1. On an early winter afternoon, clear but not cold, when the vegetable world was a weird multitude of skeletons through whose ribs the sun shone freely, a gleaming landau came to pause on the crest of a hill in Wessex. Now, Two on a Tower is a Thomas Hardy novel published in 1882, and it is my 10th favourite Hardy novel. Interestingly, Two on a Tower is a Hardy novel that I've come to like and appreciate much more in the time since I've read it. When I first read it, I think in my wrap-up, it would have been this time last year, I think I said that it was my least favourite Hardy so far, and now, obviously, I have changed my mind. There are a lot of things in Two on a Tower that I find really interesting, even if it isn't my favourite one. So, Two on a Tower follows two characters who do sometimes appear on a tower together. One is a woman called Lady Constantine. She is about 30 years old, maybe a little bit younger than that, maybe like 28, 29, and her husband is abroad. He's sort of missing. No one really knows whether he's dead or alive. He's been away for a very long time, but she's very lonely. Before he went away, she promised that she would exclude herself from society because he was jealous in general of her and everyone around her. In his long absence, she doesn't really see anyone. But then she meets this young man called Swithin St. Cleeve, because Swithin St. Cleeve is an amateur astronomer and he has been climbing a tower on her land in order to watch the stars with his telescope. Swithin St. Cleeve is about 8 or 9 years younger than Lady Constantine, but they form this strong bond and connection that begins as a friendship and begins to develop into more, and various dramatic and interesting things go on from there. In terms of what I liked about this book, I love the interest in science and astronomy. I find it really, really interesting. Astronomy was clearly something that interests Thomas Hardy quite a lot, and I think the way he writes about it in this book is really great, especially Swithin's love for the stars and astronomy and his interest in science and his desire to be a scientist and the struggles he encounters trying to achieve that dream are really, really interesting and really well done. I also really enjoy the relationship between Lady Constantine and Swithin St. Cleeve, but it's quite rare in Victorian literature to have an author write about the relationship between an older woman and a younger man. She is, as I say, about 30 and he's about 21, so there is quite an age difference between them, and the way that Hardy explores this is really, really interesting. In a lot of Victorian novels, in the bulk of Victorian romantic relationships, the man is quite a bit older than the woman, so it's really, really interesting, I think, to have a book in which the woman is much older than the man. I also think the book explores a lot of really interesting themes, aside from the theme of science and astronomy, which is really, really interesting. I also like the way that it looks at how people can change over time. I also like the way that it looks at secrecy and the dangers of secrecy. I mentioned earlier on in the week that I feel like the theme of secrecy in A Pair of Blue Eyes is not explored as well as it is in Two on a Tower, and I think that's true. The exploration of secrecy and the exploration of morality and reputation in this book is really, really interesting. Also, the theme of class. Not only do Lady Constantine and St. Swithin have a large age gap between them, they also have a massive class gap between them in that he comes from a much more impoverished background than her, that she is a lady, she is aristocratic and he is not, and that is explored really, really interestingly as well. I think the premise of Two on a Tower and many of the situations, especially in the first half of the book, I find really, really interesting. However, the things I don't like about Two on a Tower, partly it's that I just don't find Lady Constantine and Swithin St. Cleeve develop that much as characters. They don't feel as real as Hardy characters usually do, and when I read Two on a Tower I found that I sympathised with the situation and I was interested in the dramatic action, but I wasn't that interested in the characters beyond their relationship to each other, which I feel is kind of a shame. I also found the ending, or to be honest the whole last quarter, a bit odd and not really good enough. It was another one of those Thomas Hardy endings where I just felt like, what are you doing, Hardy? No. The ending of Two on a Tower did not work for me. It was a real letdown. I feel like there's a lot in this book that I find really fascinating and really interesting, but the ending did not work and the characters are not quite as fully fleshed out as they are in other Hardy novels. So although there are some things I loved about this, I don't love everything about it. And I think that's basically all I wanted to say about Two on a Tower. I do think it's an interesting Hardy novel and it contains some things in it which are very different to other Hardy novels and other Victorian literature. Like I said, I find the relationship between Swithin and Lady Constantine really interesting, and I also find the exploration of astronomy and science very, very interesting. If you're interested in the presentation of science in Victorian literature, this is probably worth a read, but I wouldn't recommend it as a place to start with Thomas Hardy because I just don't think it's his best. Please let me know if you have read Two on a Tower and what you thought of it, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about another Hardy book.